The impossible deadline. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in absolute chaos. Representatives from 73 species filled the massive chamber, their voices creating a cacophony of concern that echoed through the crystalline walls. Some floated in specialized gravity fields, others sat in environmental pods filled with their native atmospheres, and a few existed as pure consciousness within containment fields. They had gathered for one reason. The Krath Empire had declared war on humanity. Commander Sarah Chen stood alone in the human observation section, her posture relaxed despite the tension filling the room. She was a woman in her late 40s with sharp eyes that missed nothing, and silver threading through her black hair. Her simple gray uniform bore no decorations, no medals, nothing to indicate the weight of responsibility she carried. She simply stood and listened. On the holographic display dominating the center of the chamber, the Krath invasion fleet moved through space like a swarm of metallic locusts. 2,000 warships, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. They traveled in perfect formation, their dark hulls absorbing light rather than reflecting it. At the center of the formation sat the Devastator, the Krath Emperor's personal flagship, a vessel so massive it had its own gravitational field. Chancellor Vex of the Quellan Federation spoke first. His species resembled upright crustaceans with dozens of delicate manipulator limbs. His voice carried the weight of someone who had witnessed countless civilizations rise and fall. The projections are unanimous. Humanity's military forces will be overwhelmed within 3 standard weeks. The Krath Empire has never lost a war in 3,000 years. They have conquered 47 stellar nations. They do not negotiate. They do not show mercy. A Tyrillian representative, her crystalline form pulsing with bioluminescent patterns, added her assessment. Humanity has been a spacefaring species for only 200 years. The Krath have been perfecting warfare for 30 centuries. This is not a battle. This is an extinction event. Admiral Korthax of the Zenthari hegemony, a species that resembled armored bears, rumbled his agreement. I have studied the Krath military doctrine extensively. They employ overwhelming force, superior technology, and ruthless efficiency. They do not accept surrender until a species is completely broken. Humanity should begin evacuation procedures immediately. Sarah listened to them all without changing expression. She had heard similar assessments from her own military analyst 6 months ago. The difference was that her people had not stopped at assessment. They had moved to preparation. Perhaps we can negotiate on humanity's behalf, suggested Ambassador Lyra, a being of pure energy contained within a magnetic bottle. Her voice resonated with genuine compassion. The Krath might be willing to accept tribute instead of conquest. Humanity could become a client state rather than facing annihilation. The Krath do not accept tribute from species they consider weak, Chancellor Vex replied, and they consider all younger species weak by definition. Humanity's only options are fight and die quickly, or surrender and die slowly. The chamber filled with voices again, each species offering their perspective on humanity's imminent doom. Some were sympathetic. Others were coldly analytical. A few seemed almost eager to witness what they clearly believed would be a one-sided massacre. None of them offered military assistance. The Krath were too powerful, too feared. No species wanted to risk drawing their attention. Sarah checked the chronometer on her wrist. The Krath fleet would enter human-controlled space in exactly 14 minutes. She had heard enough. We will handle this ourselves, she said quietly. The chamber fell silent. 73 species turned their attention to the lone human standing in her section. Chancellor Vex's antennae twitched in what might have been confusion or concern. Commander Chen, I understand this is difficult to accept, but you must face reality. The Krath Empire fields technology centuries beyond your current capabilities. Their weapons can crack planets. Their shields can withstand sustained bombardment from entire fleets. Their tactical algorithms have been refined through 3 millennia of continuous warfare. Sarah walked slowly to the center speaking area. Her boots made soft sounds on the polished floor, the only noise in the suddenly quiet chamber. When she reached the center, she turned to face the assembled council. How long did it take the Krath to conquer the Vrillian Commonwealth? She asked. Chancellor Vex consulted his records. 4 months and 17 days. And the Thessian Star Kingdom? 6 months and 3 days. The Mordanian Collective? 8 months and 11 days. Vex paused, his manipulator limbs moving in agitation. Commander, I fail to see the relevance of this historical review. Sarah's expression remained neutral, But something in her eyes changed. Something cold and calculating. The relevance, Chancellor, is that I wanted to confirm the pattern. The Krath Empire has never won a war in less than 4 months. They are methodical, systematic, and predictable. Admiral Korthax made a sound that the translation system interpreted as disdainful laughter. Predictability born from perfected strategy is not a weakness, Commander. It is the hallmark of mastery. Perhaps, Sarah acknowledged. But mastery of traditional warfare becomes a liability when facing an opponent who refuses to fight traditionally. Ambassador Lyra pulsed with curiosity. What are you suggesting, Commander Chen? Sarah turned to face the holographic display showing the approaching Krath fleet. I am stating a fact. Humanity will end this war in 5 hours. The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds. Then the chamber erupted in protests, disbelief, and what the translation system struggled to interpret as various species' versions of incredulous laughter. Impossible, shouted the Tyrillian representative. No species has ever defeated the Krath in combat, let alone in 5 hours. This is denial, Chancellor Vex said, his tone gentler now, almost pitying. Commander Chen, I understand the human psychological need to maintain hope in desperate situations, but making impossible claims serves no purpose. It is not a claim, Sarah replied calmly. It is a schedule. She returned to her seat in the human section and activated her personal display. The countdown timer showed 13 minutes until the Krath fleet entered human space. She had work to do, and no more time to waste on explanations that would not be believed anyway. The council chamber continued its debates around her. Various species proposed evacuation strategies, discussed the ethics of species preservation, and debated whether the council should condemn the Krath's actions in an official statement. None of it mattered. None of them understood what was about to happen. Sarah thought about the facilities hidden throughout Earth's solar system, the research stations buried in the ice of Europa, the weapons platforms disguised as mining operations in the asteroid belt, the quantum computing centers built into the dark side of Mercury. Humanity had spent 6 months preparing for this moment, ever since the Krath Empire had first issued their declaration of intent to expand into human territory. The elder species of the galaxy had offered advice, of course. They had shared their experiences fighting the Krath, their tactical analyses, their strategies and countermeasures. Every single one of those strategies had failed. Every species that followed conventional military doctrine had been conquered. Humanity had studied all of those failures carefully and learned the most important lesson. Never fight the Krath the way they expected to be fought. The countdown timer reached 0. On the holographic display, the Krath fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of human-controlled territory. 2,000 warships materialized in perfect formation, their dark hulls seeming to drink in the light from nearby stars. The Devastator sat at the center, its massive form dwarfing everything around it. The council chamber fell silent as every species watched the display. This was the moment of truth, the moment when humanity would either mount a desperate defense or attempt to negotiate, the moment when reality would crush whatever delusions Commander Chen harbored about winning in 5 hours. The Krath fleet began broadcasting on all frequencies. The message was simple and had been used for 3,000 years. Surrender immediately and face subjugation. Resist and face annihilation. You have 1 standard hour to comply. Sarah checked her chronometer. The 5-hour countdown had begun. For the first 10 minutes, nothing happened. The Krath fleet held position at the edge of human space, waiting for either surrender or resistance. The human fleet, consisting of only 300 ships, remained scattered throughout the solar system. They made no move to form defensive lines. They launched no preemptive strikes. They simply waited. Chancellor Vex turned toward the human section. Commander Chen, your fleet is not responding to the Krath presence. Are you experiencing communication difficulties? No communication difficulties, Sarah replied without looking up from her personal display. Everything is proceeding according to schedule. But your ships are not even in defensive positions. The Tyrillian representative's crystalline form flashed with agitation. The Krath will interpret this as either surrender or incompetence. Let them interpret it however they wish, Sarah said calmly. The Krath fleet waited for precisely 1 hour. When no surrender came and no resistance formed, they began their advance. 2,000 warships moved forward in textbook formation, their weapons charging, their shields at maximum strength. They had performed this same maneuver hundreds of times before. It always ended the same way. Admiral Korthak studied the tactical display with professional interest. The Krath are executing a standard overwhelming force advance. They will reach Earth's orbital space in approximately 90 minutes. Commander Chen, if humanity has any defensive strategy, now would be the time to implement it. Sarah finally looked up from her display. She checked her chronometer again. 1 hour and 3 minutes had elapsed. Right on schedule. Admiral Korthak's, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustics. How familiar are you with human history? The Xanthari Admiral's armored features showed confusion. I have studied your species' development extensively. Why do you ask at this moment? Because you are about to witness something that no other species has ever demonstrated, Sarah replied. You are about to see what happens when a species that has been fighting itself for 10,000 years finally turns that experience outward. She stood and walked back to the center speaking area, her eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the advancing Krath fleet. For 3,000 years, the Krath have perfected the art of traditional warfare. They have superior technology, superior numbers, and superior experience. Against any species that fights conventionally, they are unbeatable. She paused, a slight smile crossing her face. Unfortunately for them, humanity abandoned conventional warfare approximately 8,000 years ago. The chronometer on Sarah's wrist chimed softly. Exactly 90 minutes had elapsed since the Krath fleet entered human space. Now, she said quietly, we begin. On the holographic display, every human ship simultaneously activated systems the Council had never seen before. Strange energy signatures bloomed across the tactical display. The Krath fleet continued advancing, apparently unaware that anything had changed. But something had changed. Something fundamental. The Council members leaned forward, their attention completely focused on the display. Whatever was about to happen, they had never seen anything like it in the galaxy's recorded history. Sarah stood motionless, watching the timer count upward. 3 hours and 30 minutes remained until her 5-hour deadline. The war had begun. The 5-hour victory, the second hour began with silence. The Krath fleet continued its advance toward Earth, maintaining perfect formation. Their weapons remained charged, their shields glowed with contained energy, and their tactical computers calculated firing solutions for every human ship in the system. Everything appeared normal to them. Everything was proceeding exactly as it had in hundreds of previous conquests. Then the Devastator's navigation system reported an anomaly. In the Galactic Council chamber, the displays showed what was happening in real time. Chancellor Vex's manipulator limbs froze mid-gesture as he processed the incoming data. That is impossible. The Krath flagship just altered course by 0.03 degrees. A minor navigational correction, Admiral Korthak suggested, though his voice lacked certainty. Perhaps they detected a debris field. No, the Tyrillian representative said, her crystalline form pulsing rapidly as she analyzed the sensor data. Look at the other ships. They are all making microscopic course corrections. Different corrections. Their formation is degrading. Sarah remained standing at the center of the chamber, her eyes fixed on the holographic display. The Krath navigation systems rely on quantum-entangled positioning beacons. Very precise, very reliable, almost impossible to jam using conventional methods. Almost? Ambassador Lyra's energy form flickered with interest. We seeded their approach vector with specialized particles 6 months ago, Sarah explained. Particles that interfere with quantum entanglement at a very specific frequency. The interference is minimal, just enough to introduce tiny errors into their navigation calculations. Errors that compound over time. Chancellor Vex studied the display with growing concern. But the effect is so small. How does this help you? Watch, Sarah said simply. The Krath fleet continued advancing, but now each ship was calculating slightly different positions for itself and its neighbors. The flagship thought it was maintaining proper formation. The escorts thought they were in correct positions relative to the flagship, but each ship's perception of reality was fractionally different from every other ship's perception. Over the next 15 minutes, those fractional differences grew. Ships began executing collision avoidance maneuvers to avoid obstacles that did not exist in the positions they thought they did. The perfect formation that the Krath had maintained for 3 millennia began to unravel. They are still dangerous, Admiral Korthax observed. A scattered fleet can still fight. Can it? Sarah asked. Can a fleet fight when every ship's targeting computer thinks enemy vessels are in slightly different positions than they actually occupy? As if in answer, the Krath fleet opened fire on the nearest human ships. 2,000 warships unleashed devastating barrages of energy weapons and kinetic projectiles. The weapons fire blazed across space in a display of overwhelming destructive power. Every single shot missed, not by much. The Krath weapons were still extraordinarily accurate, but in space warfare, missing by 10 meters was the same as missing by 10,000 kilometers. The human ships simply were not where the Krath targeting computers thought they were. The council chamber filled with gasps and exclamations of disbelief. Species who had witnessed Krath conquest for centuries watched in shock as the most feared military force in the galaxy fired uselessly into empty space. This is just the first layer, Sarah said. Her chronometer showed 1 hour and 47 minutes elapsed. Now comes the second. On the display, every human ship simultaneously broadcast a signal. It was not a weapon. It was not a communication. It was data. Massive amounts of data transmitted on every frequency the Krath fleet used for internal coordination. What are your ships sending? The Trillian representative asked. Instructions, Sarah replied. The Krath fleet operates with a hierarchical command structure. The flagship issues orders that cascade down through the fleet. Each ship confirms receipt and execution. It is very efficient when everything works correctly. And when it does not, Chancellor Vex asked, though he was beginning to understand. When it does not, the system becomes a liability. Sarah gestured to the display. We are sending fake confirmation signals. Each Krath ship is receiving hundreds of false confirmations from ships that do not exist, reporting successful execution of orders that were never given. Their tactical network is drowning in phantom data. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The Krath fleet's coordination collapsed. Ships received contradictory orders. Tactical computers reported situations that did not match sensor data. Captains tried to sort through the confusion while their systems insisted that everything was functioning normally. In the chaos, the human fleet struck, but they did not use weapons. Instead, 300 human ships deployed devices that looked like metallic seeds. Thousands of them scattered throughout the Krath formation. They activated simultaneously, and each one began broadcasting its own set of fake signals. Fake confirmations, fake tactical data. You are not fighting them, Ambassador Lyra observed with something like awe in her voice. You are making them fight themselves. War is about imposing your will on the enemy, Sarah said. Sometimes the most effective way to do that is to make the enemy unable to impose their own will on themselves. 2 hours and 30 minutes had elapsed. The Krath fleet attempted to reorganize. The Devastator's command crew were not fools. They recognized they were under some form of coordinated attack. They began issuing orders through backup communication systems, attempting to cut through the confusion and re-establish control. That was when the third layer activated. The Krath had built their empire on technological superiority. Their computer systems were advanced, their artificial intelligence protocols were sophisticated, and their security measures were considered unbreakable. What they did not know was that humanity had been studying captured Krath technology for 6 months, ever since a damaged Krath scout ship had drifted into human space. Human cyber warfare specialists had not tried to break the Krath security. They had simply studied how it worked, learning its patterns and protocols. Then they had created something unique, a virus that did not attack Krath systems. It simply confused them. The virus spread through the Krath fleet's network like a whisper. It did not damage anything. It did not destroy data. It simply changed small details. A tactical display would show a ship at 98% power instead of 100%. A damage report would indicate minor hull stress that did not exist. A crew roster would list a maintenance technician as being on duty when they were actually off duty. Individually, each change was meaningless. Collectively, they created an environment of uncertainty where nothing could be completely trusted. The Krath captains began doubting their own instruments. They started cross-checking everything manually, which slowed their response times. They became hesitant, cautious, second-guessing their own decisions. You are introducing friction into their decision-making process, Chancellor Vex said. his voice showing something between horror and admiration. You are not defeating them with superior force. You are defeating them with superior psychology. Humanity has fought more wars against itself than all other known species combined, Sarah replied. We understand how soldiers think, how commanders think, how fear and doubt spread through a military organization. The Krath have spent 3,000 years perfecting how to destroy enemies. We have spent 10,000 years perfecting how to break them. 3 hours had elapsed. The Krath Emperor finally understood what was happening. From aboard the Devastator, he issued a direct communication to Earth. His image appeared on the holographic displays throughout the council chamber, a being that resembled a massive insectoid warrior, with compound eyes that glowed with intelligence and mandibles that could crush steel. Humans! The Emperor's voice boomed through the translation systems. Your tricks are impressive, but tricks cannot defeat true power. We still have 2,000 warships. You have 300. Cease these deceptions and face us in honorable combat, or we will reduce your homeworld to ash. Sarah activated the communication system from her position in the council chamber. Her image appeared on screens throughout the Krath fleet. When she spoke, her voice was calm and professional. Emperor Krath, you misunderstand the situation. This is not a trick. This is not a deception. This is war, and in war there is no honor. There is only victory or defeat. She paused. You are already defeated. You simply have not realized it yet. The Emperor's mandibles clicked in anger. Defeated? You have not destroyed a single one of my ships. No, Sarah agreed. We have not. We do not need to. She made a gesture, and new data appeared on the displays. The council members studied it in growing disbelief. Your fleet entered our space 3 hours ago, Sarah continued. In that time, you have not successfully fired a single shot at an actual target. Your formation has collapsed. Your communication systems are compromised. Your computers are unreliable. Your captains are confused and demoralized. You cannot coordinate an attack, you cannot navigate accurately, and you cannot trust your own instruments. She leaned forward slightly. Emperor, you command 2,000 warships that are currently more dangerous to each other than they are to us. Several of your vessels have already nearly collided because their navigation systems disagree on their relative positions. Your tactical network is so flooded with false data that your commanders cannot distinguish real threats from phantom ones. And my personal favorite, 3 of your ships are currently targeting each other because their friend or foe identification systems have been confused by our spoofing. The Emperor stared at her through the display. For the first time in 3,000 years of conquest, he was experiencing something unfamiliar. Not fear exactly, but recognition that he had encountered something beyond his experience. What do you want? He asked finally. Withdraw your fleet from human space immediately, Sarah replied. Return to your empire. Send a message to every species you currently subjugate that the Krath Empire no longer claims dominion over human territory. In exchange, we will deactivate our countermeasures and allow you to leave with your fleet intact. And if I refuse? Sarah's expression did not change. Then we activate the 4th layer, the one we have not told you about yet, the one that is significantly less pleasant than what you have experienced so far. The Emperor was silent for a long moment. His compound eyes studied Sarah's face, searching for deception or weakness. He found neither. How long do I have to decide? He asked. Sarah checked her chronometer. You have 53 minutes remaining. After that, the decision will be made for you. The communication ended. In the council chamber, no one spoke. 73 species watched the Krath fleet hanging in space, weapons still charged but unable to function effectively. They watched the most powerful military force in the galaxy rendered impotent, not by superior firepower, but by superior thinking. Admiral Korthax finally broke the silence. Commander Chen, I must ask, is there actually a 4th layer? Sarah turned to look at him. Admiral, the first rule of warfare is never tell your enemy everything you are capable of. The second rule is make sure they believe you are capable of even more. She smiled slightly. Of course there is a 4th layer. We are humans. There is always another layer. 47 minutes later, with precisely 6 minutes remaining on Sarah's deadline, the Krath fleet withdrew. 2,000 warships activated their hyperspace drives and vanished from human space. As they departed, the Devastator transmitted a formal message recognizing human sovereignty and renouncing all claims to human territory. 5-hour war was over. The Galactic Council chamber remained silent for several heartbeats after the Krath fleet disappeared. Then Chancellor Vex spoke, his voice quiet and thoughtful. Commander Chen, the galaxy has feared the Krath Empire for 3,000 years. 47 civilizations have fallen to their conquests. You defeated them in 4 hours and 54 minutes without destroying a single ship or killing a single soldier. How is this possible? Sarah returned to her seat in the human section. She looked tired now, the tension of the past hours finally showing on her face, but her voice remained steady. Chancellor, the elder species made a fundamental error when assessing humanity. You looked at our technology and found it lacking. You looked at our military forces and found them insufficient. You looked at our experience in space and found it minimal. She paused. But you did not look at our history. You did not understand what we are. And what are you? Ambassador Lyra asked. We are a species that has been at war with itself for 10,000 years, Sarah replied. We have fought with stones and spears, with swords and arrows, with guns and bombs, with nuclear weapons and biological weapons and cyber weapons. We have destroyed our own cities, poisoned our own lands, and brought ourselves to the brink of extinction multiple times. She stood and walked to the center of the chamber one final time. Every weapon ever invented, we invented to use against ourselves. Every tactic, every strategy, every form of warfare we perfected by fighting each other. We know war in ways that peaceful species cannot comprehend, because we have never stopped studying it, never stopped refining it, never stopped learning from our mistakes. The Tyrillian representative's crystalline form pulsed with understanding. That is why you did not fight the Krath with traditional tactics. Traditional tactics are what peaceful species use when forced to fight. You use the tactics of a species for whom war is not an aberration, but a fundamental part of your nature. Exactly, Sarah confirmed. The Krath expected us to fight like the other species they had conquered. They expected fleets and battles and heroic last stands. They expected us to fight honorably, following the established rules of warfare. She paused. But humans wrote different rules. Rules forged in 10,000 years of fighting the most dangerous opponent we have ever faced ourselves. Chancellor Vex was quiet for a moment, processing everything he had witnessed. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight of realization that seemed to settle over the entire chamber. Commander Chen, I believe the galaxy owes humanity an apology. We dismissed you as young and inexperienced. We offered sympathy for your impending defeat. We never considered that a species so young in space could be so old in warfare. He paused. What happens now? Sarah smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. Now, Chancellor, humanity would like to formally propose a new initiative to the Galactic Council. We call it the Collective Defense Protocol. Any species threatened by aggressive conquest can request human military advisement. We will teach you what we have learned. We will show you how to defend yourselves not with bigger weapons or stronger shields, but with better thinking. You would share your knowledge? Admiral Korthax asked, surprise evident in his voice. We would, Sarah confirmed, because the Krath are not the only threat in the galaxy, and because humanity learned something else during our long history of warfare. The best way to ensure your own survival is to make sure your neighbors can survive too. Strong allies are better than conquered territories. Ambassador Lyra pulsed with a warm glow. I believe I speak for many species when I say we would welcome such knowledge. Though I must ask, Commander, are you not concerned that teaching other species your methods might someday be used against humanity? Sarah considered this for a moment. Ambassador, humanity has spent 10,000 years fighting enemies who knew all our tactics, who understood our psychology, who could predict our strategies because they were human too. If we can survive that, we can survive anything. She returned to her seat and finally allowed herself to relax. The crisis was over. The war was won. And the galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. In the days that followed, 17 species formally requested human military advisors. The Krath Empire quietly began releasing several of its conquered territories, suddenly uncertain about the cost of maintaining an empire in a galaxy where humanity was willing to intervene. Pirates and raiders throughout known space began avoiding human-protected trade routes. The 5-hour war became legend. Historians would debate its details for centuries. Military academies throughout the galaxy would study it as an example of asymmetric warfare perfected. But the most important result was simpler. The galaxy learned that humanity was not dangerous because of their weapons or their technology. They were dangerous because of how they thought. And that, Sarah Chen knew, was far more terrifying than any weapon could ever be. The timer on her chronometer showed 5 hours and 0 minutes, right on schedule.